What is happening, best ever listeners? This is Matt Faircloth, and welcome to the Best Ever CRE Show. I am your host today, Matt Faircloth, coming at you every Friday. So mark your calendars for Fridays when my episodes drop. I will see you then. Today's episode is a really awesome one that I want you guys to listen for a few different things. Whether you are looking to get into the multi-thousand level of units of multifamily ownership or not, there is a certain, call it like psychology or growth mindset that you need to have. And it goes back to perhaps, Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. It goes back to being willing to do certain things and having things you will say no to and things you really want to lean into to help you grow. So ask yourself that. What are the things you're willing to do, to lean into, to be willing to grow your business? Listen to what our guest did to grow his business and things that he's focused on doing over and over and over again, and what matters to him and what doesn't. Really interesting. That's probably one of my biggest takeaways is what matters when he looks at a new deal and what doesn't matter as much as those first things do. So listen for all those things in today's episode. Before we get into our guest, I want to just reach into my best ever toolbox real quick and pull something out. And that is very simple. The best ever website, bestevercre.com. There's a lot there. There's even tickets for Best Ever Con. There are the Best Ever talent solutions that you can check out on how Best Ever can help you add new talented members to your amazingly talented company as you guys continue to grow. And there's all kinds of other things, including the Best Ever newsletter, which now has 50,000. That's right. You heard it. 50,000 subscribers. So if you want to get in front of those 50,000 subscribers to put whatever business or equity offering you may have, you can do that by going to bestevercre.com. Or you could just join it, become 50,001 people that are subscribers to the Best Ever newsletter. Help us grow, be a part of the Best Ever community, and put what you've got in front of the Best Ever community by going to bestevercre.com. That's what I got for you. Now, guys, let us hop into our episode with my brand new friend, Mike Roeder. Best Ever listeners, my guest today is Mike Roeder. He is one of the principals at Granite Towers Equity, which is sitting on 3,300 plus units of apartment communities all across the globe. Not really across the globe, but he's in Dallas, Fort Worth, Atlanta, and Minnesota. Very, very strong markets. You're reviewing their website. It looks like really, really great communities. These are really places that people like to call home. And I really want to delve in with Mike about creating that home feel. And Mike, one more quick compliment before I bring you on here is I give you kudos for calling your apartments communities. And Best Ever listeners, I challenge you all to stop calling, I own this many apartments or whatever. Your tenants would never want to call it that. It's a community. It's a home, right? And I commend you, Mike, for the calling it residences, communities, those kinds of things. First of all, welcome. And second, where did that culture come from of the community call? That seemed very intentional on your website. Why?
Yeah, piggybacking on what you just said, Matt, you have to take a look at it from the resident's eye and, how do they feel about where they live, and calling it a community versus an apartment, calling them a resident versus a tenant. It makes a difference. It seems like the smallest little tweak, but when you're actually talking to these individuals and you're talking to your team, that type of sense of community really comes together if you use, different words like that really portray it as a community instead of, just a place that you're buying and you're renting out to someone.
Well, words matter, don't they? Right. I mean, and it conveys to your team that runs those properties. Do you guys self-manage or do you use third party?
We use third-party management at this point.
Okay. Yep. But you hopefully mandate that your property managers, look and think of their residents in the same in the same way.
Correct. And when you're asset managing these property management companies, and a lot of your core values should flood through, with what they're doing. You need to make sure that they have the proper leadership. You need to make sure that their core values align with yours. And you need to make sure that when they're running these properties, they're running them how you would like them to run them. So yeah, that makes a big, big difference, Matt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. 3,300 units. This is that hopefully, if that happened overnight, man, it better not have been, right? How long ago did you get into the real estate space, and what was like the light switch that caused you to get in? Are you gonna tell me you ever reached that poor dad?
I have, yeah, read that. Gosh, I mean,
No,
it
was that what got you? That's what got me into real
no,
estate.
I mean, I would say that definitely fueled my interest. But
Okay.
before I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, we were going to St. Cloud State University. When I say we, it was myself and my girlfriend. We've now been married for 16 years. And,
Nice.
there was just the opportunity to buy a 4-bedroom house near campus, rent out 3 out of the 4 bedrooms, cover our mortgage, cover our expenses. And so that's what we did. We were 20 years old. We bought our first rental property, house hacked it per se, and, just fell in love with being landlords at that point. And so what we ended up doing is we turned that into a rental, bought another rental property, all single family residences, and stacked those, over like a 5-year time period. Mm-hmm. And, it was great. But at the same time, we were taking on everything. So we were doing the maintenance, we were doing the marketing, we were doing the leasing, we were doing the evictions when we had to do that. And, we eventually moved about an hour from those rental properties. So here I was commuting an hour to my corporate job, getting back home. I had 2 young children, commuting an hour to do all the maintenance and everything else on the single family properties. And it's like, gosh, this is not how it should be. And we couldn't really, hire a third party property management company for those single families because they wouldn't cash flow. They'd be negative every month. And so we ended up, chatting a lot with my business partner. He was a great friend. We had become friends when we were like 16. We snowboarded for the same local snowboard shop. We were sponsored, making crazy videos and whatnot. And he ended up becoming a professional, and he was advised by his CPA to start buying apartment complexes and for his wife to be a real estate professional. So that way could offset his high income, which worked great. And so he was like, gosh, why don't we pool our capital together, start buying some apartment complexes, hire third-party management so you don't have to do all the work, Mike, and then we can scale, our real estate portfolio. And that's exactly what we did. And that was back in 2015 when we did that.
Okay, so he was your flight. He was out there shredding up the snowboard slopes, making all the sponsorship money, wearing Burton jackets and everything like that, right? Bringing in all that, and then funneling you over to real estate. For you to that's great. I love that. I love that you were on the on the snowboarding team for your local high school or college. Is that what it was?
It was a local snowboard shop. So, if you go into like a surf shop or a snowboard shop, they had a team of riders that would ride for the shop and promote it and make videos and whatnot.
Okay. So, cool.
Yeah.
Was he your first investor? Your first equity? This buddy of yours growing up?
Yeah. So it was myself, him, and then one other partner, and we just pooled our capital, a third. And, bought a 20 unit, bought an 8 unit together, bought a 12 unit together. And, just really realized that we had some really good synergies together.
Yeah.
And then we started our company together, myself and him, back in 2017. So about 2 years after we started investing, we started our company.
Okay. Yeah. You have a lot of similarities in that. Like when my first rental was a single family home that I lived in and rented it out, to 2 buddies of mine, girlfriend at the time, now wife of 20 years. Thank you. What was one that she put Rich Dad Poor Dad in my hand. Right. And got me reading it. And was like, wait a minute, maybe I should buy a house. But my landlord was canceling. He was ending our lease because he was selling the house. Right. Tried to buy the house that we were living in, and didn't work out. Somebody outbid us. And so we ended up having to move out to go somewhere else. And I took my buddies that were with me in house A, rented, and moved everybody over to the house that I had bought. And I just tried, hey, you guys are all paying $600 a month. How about you guys pay me $500 a month and live over here? That paid me more than the mortgage. And I did a full-time day job making $60 a month. I was, full-time job, and all the rent coming in paid the mortgage plus $60. So that was my first cash flow. It was $60, and I was living there for free. Right? It really is a great little bit of a Kool-Aid to drink. Like it converts you to real estate investing pretty quick. And I submit to best ever listeners, if you've got the chops to do it, a house hack. That's when Mike and I were doing it. They didn't call it that, but it was just called getting roommates. But now I think a house hack is the best four-way into real estate investing if you want to start at an accessible level. Would you agree, Mike? Is it still the place to be to start? If you just
I would completely agree.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's a very low cost or barrier to entry,
Yep.
so you can possibly put 5% or 10% down or whatever you decide on.
Yeah.
And, if you're living there, obviously you're getting a ton of value there, plus you're renting out the other bedrooms. The pitfall is obviously having those roommates, and if you're, 30, 40 years old, or if you have a family or whatnot, that can, be a little bit complicating.
Well, you don't have to do that, right? And I know this isn't like, the House Hack show and all that, but let's just linger there for just a minute. FHA allows you to buy up to a 4-unit building. So if you do have
Correct.
a family, this maybe is a little bit of a, you got to look a little bit harder. You are maybe looking for something that's a little more specific, but you could buy yourself a duplex, triplex, quadruplex that's got a couple of bedrooms. And you don't have to get roommates. You just might be getting neighbors,
100%.
And rent out a couple of the other apartments that are in that little 4-family. And I mean, when I bought my house, I limped into closing with 3% down, that was tight. My hands shook when I wrote that check for 3% down of the purchase price of this house, because my mentality of money wasn't there yet. But it still worked. Right. So best ever listeners, if that's you and you got the chops for it, go out there and find yourself 4-plex, FHA, 3% down. Tell them Mike Roeder sent you. Tell him Mike said to do it. Okay. So you grew in scale. Were you out in that Minnesota area? Is that where your initial foray was? Your first playground?
Correct. So we bought in our hometown, and I mean, truthfully, that was one of the larger mistakes that we've made. We were rookies. We didn't really know what we were doing. We bought a 20-unit in our hometown, and didn't necessarily do the research back then on what was happening with the college campus and the city and the population growth. And so what happened with that project was the campus enrollment plummeted off a cliff, and so all of the properties around the college campus started converting to family housing instead of student housing. And we were family housing, our 20-unit apartment complex. So what happened? Our occupancy dropped. We had to drop our rents. And so that property, we held about 4 years and we pretty much broke even on it. And there was a lot of effort that went into that. And, taking a look back, if we would have just did our research or piggybacked off of someone else's success, partnered up with someone else, we could have easily alleviated those mistakes. And then after that, we jumped into Western Wisconsin, another college town, River Falls, Wisconsin, bought a 45-unit there. That was our first syndication, as a company. That was an absolute home run, dilapidated property, renovated the full property. It was in a fantastic location, and sold that in about 2 years. And then we bought an 86-unit down in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and then just continued to scale after that.
Why Dallas-Fort Worth? Why did you go there?
Yeah, great questions. There's a lot of benefits when you're taking a look at the Dallas-Fort Worth market. So you have a ton of population growth, very, very business friendly, very diversified job base there. No state income tax. It's landlord friendly, so you can get tenants out quickly if they don't pay their rent. So all of those things drew us into that market. And then we knew a lot of investors down there as well. So we had the connections as well in that market.
What are some of the things, like you said, the 20-unit, right in your own backyard, right? And then you scaled up and did like that. That was, maybe a dud or whatever it was. And then you would had a home run with the larger property, right? What were some things that you learned in your early career out of that 20? Sometimes, Mike, I find that my bad deals, the deals that kicked my ass, man, those are my best teachers. Sometimes success is not a good teacher. Success just maybe validates, certain things that we believe about ourselves. But when I've gotten my teeth kicked in a few times, that's where I got my gray hairs and my best lessons in deals like that, right? I don't know if you agree or not, but either way, what did you learn from that, fizzle deal and the home run deal?
Yeah. So first off, I want to agree with that. I mean, the properties that you lose on or that you break even on, you learn a ton from those mistakes. And, looking back on that property, your tenant base is significant. So, household incomes were low in that area. Tenants had issues affording their rent at that property. And so that was an issue. the enrollment at the college, that was an issue that we learned a lot from. And then also not having the proper CapEx up front. So we did a lot of our projects out of cash flow. And fast forward to today, that's never something we do. We want to raise all the capital up front, have a good pool of liquidity, and be able to take care of all the issues on the front end and the renovations. And so
Let's
that was
live there for a second. Let me I use this, maybe I use the word too much, best ever listeners, but I say let's unpack that. And I feel like is it Christmas morning? Are we unpacking? What are we doing? Right. So I want to unpack, I'll just use it again, the whole thing of doing CapEx out of cash flow. Can you, and I follow you, I'm sure the best ever listeners do too. I have done that and it was a mess. So, right. Tell me more about give me like the theoretical scenario on how that could work, and then give me reality behind it.
Yeah, for sure. So, right now we raise all of our CapEx dollars and we take care of it up front.
Yeah,
exactly. Going in. So let's say you have, let's just say $1 million to infuse into a 100-unit property. Yep. And maybe some of that funds are, some of those funds are going towards the interior units, maybe a new roof, a new parking lot. Well, if you don't raise those funds or finance them with the bank up front, what happens is you're trying to claw back that cash flow over the ownership period. And so let's say you need a new roof and you're like, gosh, I'm just going to pay out a cash flow. I'm going to save up over the first year and then I'm going to take care of that roof. Well, what happens if the property doesn't cash flow that first year? What happens if your occupancy is a little bit lower, you don't get the rent growth that you were looking to achieve? Then all of a sudden you're sitting there holding the bag like, gosh, I need to put my own capital into this, or, I need to go out to the investors and have them put capital into this. And that's a really hairy, sticky, not fun situation to be in. So you want to make sure that you're doing the due diligence up front, that you're raising that capital, and that you're in a really good position when you step into that property.
And you still need the roof, right?
You do.
And so whether your deal makes money or not, you still need the roof, right?
Yep.
And exactly. I think that it's like trying to fund things out of cash flow. And I see operating budgets where there's like, oh, here's the CapEx reserve, right? And these on smaller deals, I would see underwriting. I mean, I got started going to a lot of real estate classes, believe it or not, back in the day at RIAs and stuff like that. And you would see a guy put up the operating budget for like a triplex, and he would say, okay, well, we're going to set aside $200 a door per year, or whatever. And it was all this theoretical line item for a CapEx reserve. Here's the problem. Number one, you are setting aside money for a fixed cost that's not going to go away. It is a real thing. Your HVAC is going to die. Your roof is going to leak, and your windows are going to need to be replaced. And you're going to need to do major investment in the property over time. They do degrade, right? Now, that's right. You're relying on something then that's variable, which is operating cash flow to pay into that. Shit happens, guys, like tenants move out, insurance has gone up like 20, 30% in the last couple of years. Not many folks predicted that. So there is so much variability in operating expenses and top line revenue that I think it's just not smart to try and set asides out of something that's variable for something that is guaranteed fixed going to happen no matter what. Right. That's the way I had to get a bucket of cold water in my face too to learn about that. We had a 150 unit, and we were planning on doing the unit turns. This is the underwriter we were working with at the time. No longer work with this underwriter, but we were planning on the model was to, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do like $6,000 unit turns out of cash flow. It's fine. We got that. We're making plenty. We could turn 2-3 units a month out of cash flow. You can, as long as you're 94% occupied. You can, as long as your insurance doesn't change. You can, as long as you have zero utility problems. And this is a 1972 vintage asset. So of course, Mike, what happened? Sewer line, like water line leaks started happening, utility costs came in, and before you knew it, you couldn't afford in a month that $6,000 to $7,000. And God forbid your occupancy drops down. And these things become spirals, right? Because you need to make that CapEx investment. And if you don't, you're going to have revenue drops. And if your revenue drops, you can't make the CapEx investment further, right? So it's this, downward spiral in that. So way better, best of our listeners, to draw out, I would think, Mike, probably a CapEx need over the next couple of years for an asset when you guys buy. How far out are you guys looking? 3 years,
Yeah.
5 years?
Yeah, typically we're looking at a whole 5 years. So we project a 5-year hold period on most of our acquisitions. So we're taking a look at that whole hold period.
And you're saying I might need a roof in year 3. And so how are we paying for that? Got it. Brilliant. Okay.
That's exactly it. And the other thing that we've done to really take a step in the opposite direction is we raise all of our CapEx funds on the front side. So we don't finance them with the bank, which, obviously you might be able to get a better IRR, a better return, because you're not raising that capital or you're not putting your own capital in. Mm-hmm. But the potential issue with that is a lot of the lenders, they'll stick you to what you said you were going to do up front. So let's say you have a 2-year plan and you have $2 million that you're going to infuse into this project. Well, if you want to call an audible, maybe you're renovating the interior units and you said you were going to put granite countertops in all the units, and all of a sudden you find out, gosh, it's really not worth it. Like, I should put Formica in and I'm going to be able to get the same rents. Yeah. Some of the lenders will say, hey, I don't care. You're putting in the granite countertops. So it allows us to call audibles and to make adjustments along the hold period, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, having that cash reserve for anything CapEx, is great. So let's keep going back to your origin story. We were in Minnesota. You still own in Minnesota? I see that's Minneapolis. You transitioned into larger assets in the Minnesota market. Then we went to DFW for all the reasons why a lot of people invest in DFW, because it is one of the top 5 growing markets in the U.S. and has been for, I think, at least the last 10 years, if not more. Right. Yeah. Then Atlanta. Why Atlanta?
So it's actually Nashville. So we did Minnesota, and we still invest in Minnesota. We're actually closing on a property today, 165 units up here in Minnesota. And we're very opportunistic. So we want to make sure that it's in the right submarket, affluent submarkets, high income areas, B-class assets up here. Dallas, Fort Worth, obviously we talked about that. And then Nashville was our third market. And the reason why we got into Nashville, all the same reasons as Dallas, Fort Worth. So you have the population growth, no state income tax, landlord friendly. It's a medical hub. They have over 500 medical companies there. So very stable job base. But the other reason was we had a third partner that had done a ton of legwork in Nashville, built out the relationships, knows the market inside and out. And he brought us a great opportunity about 4 years ago and said, hey guys, I would love to partner with you on this. Here's why I love this deal and I love this submarket. And, it was a deal where we couldn't pass up on it. So we partnered with him. And after that, we continued to buy in Nashville because we liked it so much.
It's yet another growing market in the U.S. When we were there for BPCon years ago, and one of my college buddies from my alma mater, Virginia Tech, was there, and he was like, he's a CM working for a large construction outfit, and they're doing commercial and everything like that. But he told me that in Nashville, there is a specific permit. And again, best ever listener, if I'm wrong about this, just let me tell the story either way. Okay. You don't have to correct me because this is like hearsay, but it's still an interesting story. He told me that the permit to own a large crane that you would need to do like a high rise. And I know you might not be buying high rises, but still that is a major investment. And the fact that people are willing to build high rises and put cranes up means that you've got a thriving economy that's enough to absorb whatever that thing is that you're building, right? Mm-hmm. Not all buildings have to be that big. When you see cranes over a city, that is a sign of major investment, right? So the permit that you need to rent that crane or to use that crane over Nashville is limited, right? Because they don't want to have too many of them, whatever. It is a 4-year waiting period at the time that I was there to get a large high-rise crane for over the city. And maybe they're trying to limit the amount of high rises going up and everything like that. But that is a sign that there's that much investment, that people are willing to wait that long to build probably, 9-figure properties. So what's the spillover? Those things create jobs. Those things create spillover into the economy for people to live in Mike's apartment communities, that are out there, right? What are the job base? Like, what's the employment centers of Nashville that you see most of your residents? Where are they working in Nashville? What's causing that economic? Don't be telling me they're guitar players down on Broadway or something like that in the music district. Aside from the music industry, what else are you seeing out there?
Yeah, there's a lot of industry there. So like I said, you have over 500 medical companies. So that's a huge employment base. You think about like companies like Oracle, they're building over $1 billion new headquarters on the east bank of Nashville, on the Cumberland River there. So you have, I think, 8,500 jobs that'll be coming, over the next few years once they complete that project. You have Vanderbilt, you have a lot of universities as well. So, there's just so many different employers in that market, which we love. And that's, truthfully, that's another mistake that we made early on, Matt, is we bought an apartment complex in an oil market. And that was really the only job base there. COVID hit, oil went negative, and the bulk of the people moved out. So we were sitting there, dropping our rents, our occupancy went down. Luckily the property is doing really good today and we're actually selling it right now. But if you're in a market where you don't have that diversity of jobs, it can be really painful if something happens to that job base.
Was that Houston, the oil market?
It was Carlsbad, New Mexico. So just a little oil market out of New Mexico. So the property looked great on the spreadsheet. We stress tested it to the max, but who would have thought that oil would have went negative?
You didn't have COVID in your underwriting, Mike.
Exactly.
Who did? Right.
Yep. But if we would have been in a market like Nashville, you might have seen a little bit of pain for 6 or 12 months, but pretty much unaffected when it comes down to it. So what you're saying is, and this is a parameter we have at DeRosa Group, and I think that best ever listeners that you guys should consider having too, is job diversity. Right. I don't care if the market is like super it's Vegas. I'm going to knock Vegas for a second, Mike. Now Vegas is growing out of this, but Vegas is a market that primarily people go for recreation. It is a tourist town, and it's gorgeous. It's amazing. They got roller coasters inside of buildings. They got all the stuff, right? It's an amazing place, and it employs a ton of people, but it relies heavily upon one industry. And this is changing. There's other industries coming in. It's not all tourism and rec, that they are Zappos, I think, and other corporations are coming in. But as an example, it is a market that's more than 20% of one employment center. Do you have, with regards to markets you evaluate, Mike, it seems like that is the diverse job employment is something that you look for in a market, because you don't want to, have the oil market dry up, so to speak, proverbially for a little bit, and have that cut your knees out with regards to job employment. What parameters does your company have? Is specific metrics that you guys have around these things? Yeah, we want to make sure that there's a significant amount of large employers that, the tenants can get jobs from. We also take a look at it on the property level. So we'll take a look at the leases, and if they have the data on the applications where these people work, we want to make sure that, it's spread out. I can't say, we're at a certain percentage, like 10%, within one job base or whatnot. But yeah, I would say that's, critical for us. Delinquency levels are critical for us, income levels, school ratings, crime rates, population growth, all very, very important for us.
Yeah, but you're right. There's a lot of factors, and school ratings are a good one too. A lot of people don't really think about that, but what resident wants to live in a community that's, got a bad, nobody wants their kids to go to a bad school, and some people have no other choice. It is what it is. I feel for them. But you don't want people to have to live in your apartment community. You want people to want to live in your apartment community. And that's why I like the school system metrics, when you're looking at a property too. And I love the job diversity thing too. So that's all great. So we've gotten an idea of how you got to where you're at now. Give me some other lessons learned as you grew and scale, and as you got into different markets. What was it like owning Minnesota and Dallas? Were you yourself the asset manager? Did you have somebody else doing that for you or with you? And give us some lessons learned in, pretty much managing using a cell phone and a laptop versus doing it in person.
Yeah. So when we started out acquiring properties down in Dallas, we were self-asset managing. So it was myself, Dan, we had a CFO on our team pretty early on that we hired, a full-time position. And it was the three of us running the ship for the first few years. So a lot of site visits, we would fly down to Dallas regularly. We would also put people on our team in that market, as co-sponsors. So that way they could go out to the property more frequently if we weren't able to fly in. And so we made it work. A couple other tricks of the trade that we implemented. A lot of the properties, we had cameras so we could see what was going on. We would have the on-site managers send us daily photos. If there started to be issues at the property, we're like, hey, take a photo of the dumpster, take a photo of the grounds. We want to see everything on the daily, if it came to that. And obviously that's a lot of work, but in order to build that trust, it was needed at times. And then hiring A players, hiring the best people that you can put into those properties was critical. And I think, at first we were so focused on making sure that we were in line with our budgeted expenses. And so sometimes we would pass on an A player because, hey, we can't fit it within the budget. But what you don't realize is if you spend a little bit more on that person, if they have the qualifications and, the personality and whatnot to create success, it's going to be well worth it if you have to pay, maybe $5,000 more or $10,000 or $15,000 more a year for that individual.
Yeah,
exactly. They do.
I don't know if you've got any anecdotes on that, but I want the best ever listeners to really take that home. Because I've been that. I used to run a construction company in Trenton, New Jersey, and I got wise enough to get out of that. But I had, we were going to the lowest bid with regards to labor, and I can't tell you how many times I'd go to the job site. It'd be like 3 p.m. and they were on their lunch break. I also went at 10 a.m. the next day and they were on their lunch break, and they just weren't putting in the time. You weren't getting the effort. It's better to pay 20-25% more. That's my quick anecdote. Give me a quick anecdote of, you get what you pay for when it comes to labor and quality for folks that, again, I'll stop using the word labor because that's like commoditizing it. These are people that are team members, right? So give me a quick anecdote on putting the right team member for the right salary in the right position.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen occupancy climb 10 percentage points, when we put the right person in versus the wrong person in. We've seen collections skyrocket, if we put the right person in. So we actually hired a collections specialist on our corporate team to work for our whole portfolio. And we've seen our delinquency decrease by about 5% across the portfolio, over the last 12 months. So huge difference when you spread that across, 3,300 units or so. And the one other piece of advice that I would give to anyone that's using third-party management is communicate that with the regionals or the SVPs or whoever's hiring the on-site crew. Let them know that you're flexible on the payroll. Let them know that, hey, if you find an A player and it doesn't fit our budget, come to me and let's have a discussion about it and see if we can fit this within the budget and if it's well worth, bringing them on.
Meaning like, okay, the budget line item is X $1,000 per year in income, and the property manager says, listen, I found a rock star, but they need X plus 10%. Okay, got it. And that's great. I think it's short-sighted to manage just to expenses and not manage to team culture, manage to growth and everything like that. Going back to the collection specialist you have working for Granite Towers for your company, are they? Is there a way to incentivize them? Is it like a commission-based or a goal incentive-based program that you run? Could you kind of get into that a little bit and tell me how that's, because I'm seeing more and more companies do it, to have a, sometimes offshore, because sometimes it helps to have somebody that's bilingual, and also, or to have someone in your office, in your corporate office that's doing it. To tell me a bit about what they do on a daily basis and how they're compensated.
Yeah, great question. So we do have an incentive. Every time that they collect $1, they get a certain percentage of that dollar.
That's great.
So they are fired up to collect from these residents. Yeah. They're working on all of our properties on the daily basis. They're making a significant amount of calls to these individuals. They're emailing them. They're texting them. Every once in a while, they'll go out and visit the actual property as well.
Really?
And to your point, Matt, they are bilingual. So we have quite a few, communities where our residents are bilingual, or, speak a different language. And so that helps significantly because they can actually, speak to these individuals and, and really work through the issue and help collect that rent.
Develops a little bit of trust to speak to someone in your native language, if that's in that. So they're incentive based in collecting. You're willing to pay the mobilization to send them out to site. I love that. How has that made a difference in their ability to collect?
It's made a huge difference. I can't pinpoint, what percentage has been collected from those on-site visits versus the calls versus the emails. But, like I said, our delinquency has went down significantly because of that. And if you think about it, the on-site staff, a lot of times, let's say you have a 100-unit property and maybe you have an on-site manager and a maintenance tech at that property. That on-site manager is working on leasing up the property. They're doing renewals, they're doing the community events, they're doing everything. They're overseeing the maintenance tech. And so to fit everything in on the collection side, to be making the calls that they should be doing, to be sending the emails, to be doing, the door knocks, it's really tough to fit it all in.
Sure.
And so if you can, add that personnel on your side and take a little bit off of their plate, that can really help out.
So a few things to point out. Are they allowed to work out payment plans? Tenant says, you know what, I just changed jobs. I need another 2 weeks. Won't happen again, that kind of thing. Whatever the story may be, is your are they enabled to work out a payment plan with the resident?
In certain situations, they are. So it depends upon the situation, and we need some sort of proof, of that situation. So if they lost their job and they got a new job, or they had a medical bill or something like that, we will work with residents in certain circumstances.
Life happens, right? Okay,
Yep,
but and I'm not saying they should or shouldn't be. I'm just curious from a protocol and to help the best ever listeners out whose wheels are already turning, that they're putting out a job stuff on Indeed right now. I want to help them out so they can hire one of their own folks here too. When we've tried this, we authorize them to work out a payment plan at DeRosa up to a certain dollar amount. Is that something you guys do too? Where like they have a certain amount of ink in their pen, so to speak, that they can, do a workout and they have to go to upper management or go to you or go to whoever if the ask is above that.
Correct. So they have up to a certain amount. I don't have that exact amount on my fingertips. And then they go to our asset. They go to our senior asset manager, if they need approval for higher than that. So very similar to what you're saying.
That's brilliant. And what I wanted to take home to best ever listeners is that for the most part, you write off bad debt, right? And if especially if a resident stop paying, or even if they moved out or whatever it may be, those things go off the books. Is this collections agent, are they going to call, like if a resident moved out of the property, but they still owe your company something, and there is a potential judgment. I've had a resident that moved out of my property like 3 years, earlier, and they showed up at our office saying, hey, listen, I'm trying to buy a house. And this judgment is that from the eviction hearing is showing up on my record, and I'm being asked to work it out. I see I owe you $2,000. Can we do a workout? I'm like, listen, this is found money. First of all,
Right.
We forgot it. We've already moved on beyond that $2,000. So it is all, proverbially gravy, and it helps the resident out so they can go live their life and learn their lessons and everything like that. Do you have your collections agent calling people that used to live in your communities, or are they focused on just current delinquency?
So there's an order of importance. So first off, we're having them focus on the residents that currently live at the property that are behind. Yeah. So that's number one priority. If they can get through that, then they're working on the residents that have moved out. And obviously, the earlier, or not the earlier, but the late, whoever's moved out most recent, that's who they're focusing on. And if you have a tenant that moved out 2 years ago, that's going to be further down the list.
Sure. And I mean, again, you got to have some, understanding of the human people, have maybe a little bit of grace there too. So when we have done this, we found that the longer it is, the lower the longer it's been, the lower you're willing to take, because at the end of the day, listen, let's just move this on. Let me help you get this off your record. So that they can move on, so that you can move on. Cause it is going to show up. These things do show up. I moved out of my apartment in college and didn't realize it, but I had a $90 cell phone bill, or $90 home phone line, because that's how old I am. It was a home phone line in the apartment, right? For $90, owed to Verizon. Went and bought a house 15 years later. I had to go call Verizon from Blacksburg, Virginia, and settle up that $90 cell phone or a home phone line charge. Right? These things don't go away. So great. These are great lessons. So now that we're in a different economy, we're in a different market, things are changing, right? How is Granite Towers Equity seeking new deals? What have you changed in your buy box, given the air quote, I almost hate this term, but the air quote new economy, because the economy changes every day. But like today, under today's economic conditions, how has Granite Towers changed its strategies in approaching the market so that you can continue to grow?
Yeah, so there's been some big changes on what properties we're willing to take a look at and underwrite and actually dive into and offer on. So number one, delinquency. Very, very tuned into delinquency. If you think about it over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a ton of inflation. And what has that done? That's increased the cost of living. So there's a lot of people struggling, to pay their bills every day, which is really sad. But when you're taking a look at, owning an apartment complex, one of the most important pieces is making sure that your residents can actually afford the rents that you're looking to achieve. So when we take a look at an asset, we're tuning into not only what's the current delinquency on the property. Usually if it's above 5%, that's a huge, huge red flag. And we're likely running the other way unless there's a big story to it that we really think we can solve. We're also looking at the residents' income level. So not only the submarket, we're looking at the neighborhood, and then we're looking at the direct property as well. And we actually have a partnership with a family office that does a lot of data analytics. That was their large business that they exited. And so they're able to run certain reports on these submarkets, and it shows the propensity for the resident to be able to afford the rents that we're looking to achieve. And so that gives us the comfort level that, hey, we can step into this property, do the renovations, increase the rent, and the residents are not only able to afford the upgrades, but they're looking for that type of upgrade as well. And then also occupancy in the area. We're looking for, well occupied areas that, are mid 90s on up. And the reason for that is, we want to make sure that, there's not a ton of places for these residents to rent. If you have a submarket that's, let's say, mid 85% or 80% occupied, there's probably a lot of concessions. There's probably a lot of people jumping around, and you're just going to have a harder time retaining those tenants as you go through your business plan.
Yeah, I love that you're approaching it from a different angle, right? Which I appreciate. And I think that a lot of folks I've talked to are like, well, I want to buy, I only want to buy a deal where I can assume the debt, and they're looking at the financial situation of the asset of what can I acquire, debt piece, that kind of thing. What vintage is it? I'm sure you have your buy boxes there, but I love that you led in with the affordability component, because I like you believe that, let's put it this way, right? Where were rents like 10 years ago versus where are rents now, right? They've gone up quite a bit. If you compare it to wages, I don't believe that wage growth has grown to the point that rent growth has. And so there are a lot more folks in the US that are apartment residents that are nowhere near the affordability level anymore. They're probably paying a good bit more than 30% of their earned income for their housing, and they're struggling. And I feel for them, but also I don't want to be subject to that. I'll let another landlord have to deal with that and maybe have to drop their rents, so to speak, right? So I like that you're going in evaluating affordability and can the residents truly afford to live here long term? Right? Are those the questions you're going in with?
They are. Yes, exactly. Can they afford these rents, this year, next year, when we increase the rents, throughout the hold period? So that's critical. We've also adjusted the debt that we're placing on properties. So we've typically been fixed rate guys, luckily, but we did have a few bridge loans, short-term 3-year loans with a couple 1-year extensions. And, we've been able to refinance out of all of those but one project, and we'll refinance that last one in the next couple of years. But giving ourselves a 7-year runway, we typically like 7-year fixed rate debt, just allows us to have that comfort and know what our biggest expense is going to be every month through the hold period, which is the debt. And it really mitigates the risk, in our opinion, because do we know that interest rates are going to drop in the future? No. Like, I really do think that they will drop, over the next 12 months from what we're seeing.
Yeah.
But, 3 years down the line, what if inflation comes ripping back and interest rates go up? Like, if you have a variable rate loan, you can be in hot water. So just pay attention to your debt, because that is a big component of whether you're going to be successful or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you go in, are you a cash flow day one and then squeeze the lemon a little bit further as you own? Are you a, complete value add, turn it around, try and, put in granite, because you're called Granite Towers equity, right? So that's like your shtick. You got to do granite everywhere, right? I'm joking, but is that, are you like a big value add? Are you a, kind of continue to run the things the way that they've been run kind of thing? What's your typical business plan in today's market for assets you're looking at?
So I would say we're a light value add group. So we're looking to step into properties that are cash flowing day one, but that have meat on the bone. Their rents are under market. Maybe there's a little bit of deferred maintenance, some classic units. And so we're typically putting in $10,000 to $20,000 per door in rehab, and that's interiors, exteriors, and amenities combined. So not heavy value add investors, but we are, putting some capital into these deals to really push the values up.
What do you have a vintage kind of thing? And I mean,
we do.
It's one of those things that to me, it's maybe more talked about and made by the market to be more important than it really is, but because it really has to go back to what you're paying dollars a door and what folks are willing to pay you dollars per square foot or dollars a door in rent, right? It's that equation, but it also goes back to potential deferred maintenance, potential, all the things that can show up in an older asset. So what is the age that you guys look for and why?
Yeah, great question. So we've adjusted that as well. So, going back 3-4 years ago, we weren't afraid to step into a 1960s product, 1970s, 1980s. Yeah. And what you'll learn over time is that, like you said before, earlier in this podcast, cast iron plumbing, that can become an issue on those older properties.
Oh, let's make the list.
Not only can become an issue, it does become an issue, right?
terracotta sewage, cast iron on the inbound, aluminum wiring, lead-based paint. Yeah, we could just make these are a few of my favorite things list if you want, then show up with 60s and 70s vintage assets. So you used to, I heard that part, go after properties like that. So you've shifted.
Correct. Exactly. We've shifted. So now we look at mid 80s on up product, 90s, early 2000s, is even more ideal. But if we're looking at an 80s product, we just want to make sure that the plumbing is more updated. So we're not running into those issues where we're digging up parking lots, we're digging up under the units, to replace that cast iron plumbing. So that's a big thing for us. Now, can I say we're never going to buy a 1970s product again? No. If we came across something that was just a steal of a deal, we're just going to load up the CapEx dollars on the front end and know that we're going to have to, spend $1 million on plumbing over the next 5 years or what. Yeah. But right now, 1985 on up.
I think the 70s stuff will probably need to get discounted a little bit. It's not the 90s, 70s vintage assets have doubled, tripled in value in the last, say, 5-6 years, because that's kind of where all the cool kids were going. That's where the value add game was really easy to play. Because let's rewind the clock. That's where a lot of the mom and pop baby boomer landlords not lived physically, but that was their playground in the 60s, 70s, 80s built. I mean, we've looked at deals that were built by the founder of the family business and they were currently managed by his kids, and those were 70s built properties, right? And the family still owned it, but now they're looking to age out. Third generation didn't want anything to do with it, So there's a lot of those. I think a lot of that baby boomer dissolution has happened already. But that's who owned a lot of those properties. That was a good sandbox for a while, but I feel like it grew faster than maybe it should have, given the amount of CapEx. Going all the way back to your initial comment, and you just said it again, the amount of CapEx you need to run a 70s built asset needs to be probably the forefront of consideration. These assets cannot go away. As I see here in your bio, America needs more housing. We cannot afford in America for the 60s and 70s and even the 80s built assets to just dissolve into the ground. They're not going to become obsolete. We need them, but maybe they're a little overpriced. you know?
Yeah. And what you've seen over the last, year or two is you've seen the cap rates expand a little bit in between, C-class properties and A-class properties. 2-3 years ago, they were pretty tight, 50, 75 basis points apart.
Well, yeah.
And now it's like, you're probably looking at 150 basis points. So they are being discounted to some extent, like you're saying, Matt. Yeah.
C should trade at 7% cap rate, 6.5 cap rate today. And if you're going to buy, like a class B, class A, maybe you don't make a ton of money going in cash flow, but you should be able to push rents a little bit, ride up the appreciation curve a little bit. I mean, maybe there's a bit of a normalization. Cap rates don't need to be like 8-9% on C class unless it's super distressed. But I think it's okay to see it a little bit higher to adjust for the capital improvements that you need. So,
completely agree.
There. That's what Mike and I figured it out. That's what happens with C class. So you're looking at larger stuff that is, 80s, 90s vintage, a little less CapEx reserves having to do, maybe a little bit room to grow in there too. What's the deal you guys did recently that you're really happy? You said closing one today, something like that?
We're actually closing on one this afternoon, 165 units up in Minnesota. Just a great submarket, very affluent area.
What do you love about the deal? Tell us, what do you love about the deal? Let's start here. For best ever listeners, how'd you find it? And if it's like, you were best and final of the best and final of the best and final of the best and final, I get that. That's just what you got to do sometimes. Or if you have an interesting story, hey, you found it, and then tell me what you love about the deal.
Yeah, great question. So we found this property through a listing broker, so through CBRE. Have a good relationship with them. We've sold a property, in central Minnesota with them before. So they know, like, and trust us. And this property was listed. So we buy some properties off market. We buy some properties that have been listed. And what you're seeing in today's environment, Matt, is the certainty of close is so dang important, because there's a lot of individuals that will put these properties under contract and they can't perform. They can't raise the capital, or they don't have the capital. And so a deal falls out of contract. So there is a lot of fear on the selling side about that happening. And, CBRE knew that we were going to be able to perform on this asset and another asset. So we put the 165 and 129 unit property under contract at the same time, closed on the 129 unit, and then we worked our way into the 165 unit property. Sellers are selling this property because they've owned it since 2003. So they developed it. So it's been 22 years in their portfolio. They have multiple investors in it. So they're looking to, cycle the capital, and then their loan was coming due, with Fannie Mae as well. So it's, a good time to exit for them, but at the same time, not an ideal time to exit, because values have come down by 20 to 30% over the last few years.
You missed the mark. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Or did they maintain it over those 22 years with regards to, like, kitchen conditions? Or are you going to be able to go in there and, value add and do like a, freshen up on the kitchen and bathroom and command a little bit more, and like typical, value add 101, right? Are you able to do all that? Or did they maintain the interior qualities to where you're just going to get behind the wheel and drive it?
Yeah, so property's in really good condition. There's 34 classic units out of the 165. So we'll fully renovate those units. We're spending about $16,000 a door on those renovations. And then all the other units in great condition. They've already been upgraded, but they tend to, what they've done is they've just kept the asset full, close to 100% occupied, and have just enjoyed that ride. But the rents are, $100 to $200 below market. So we're going to make that adjustment, push that up to market. And then also they have about 250 underground parking spots. And so we're going to bump that up for $25 a month to $60 a month. That's what all the comps in the area are already charging. And then we're putting in a bulk Wi-Fi program where we own the actual Wi-Fi fiber optic cable. We pay a small monthly fee, to the service provider. And then we charge back to the residents. And the great thing about that is we're charging about $69 a month, and it costs anywhere from $85 to $110 a month with other providers to get that same service. So we're providing value to the tenants, or the residents, I should say. And at the same time, we're able to make a decent amount of profit there. So those are a few things that we love about the deal. The income levels are great. Delinquency is less than 0.7% over the last 12 months. So it's pretty much non-existent.
Wow.
Which is huge for us. And it's been 97 to 99% occupied over the last 12 months as well, which is great. And then also very little supply coming online in that submarket over the next couple of years, which is awesome.
It's an interesting comment you made about them being such highly occupied, because I've heard that metric, and that, like, you show me an apartment complex that's 98 to 100% leased. That likely means they're not pushing the envelope on rents. You probably got an older owner that is just not looking to rock the boat. Like, that's probably one of their primary revenue streams, or they just don't want to, really, really push. They're comfortable, probably got low debt, all the things. And so they don't want to push the envelope too hard. You're probably looking at an asset that's closer to the top of the market if you're at 91, 92% occupancy, right? Because that means that there's a little bit of attrition. They're able to push hard enough to the point where not everyone that wants to rent wants to live there, because it's, they've got some options close to the top of the market. If you're at 98% occupancy, everybody's like, heck yeah, where am I going to go? This is I got a deal going on here, right? Yep. So interesting equation, and somewhat counterintuitive to what you would initially think when you see that.
Yep. No, 100%. I completely agree. So that's something that we look for, not only in the property, but the comps as well. So what we do, Matt, is we'll go out and we'll physically visit each of the competitive properties, and we'll shop them as a prospective tenant, whether that's right or wrong. It allows us to get into the units to see what they're doing for renovations, see what rent they're charging.
It's called the secret shop.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're always looking for those competitive properties to be in that mid 90% range. And every once in a while, you'll find one that's under that. And usually there's a story or a reason behind that.
When I did the secret shop, one of my partners did the secret shop, and he brought his wife with him. And she was like, I feel like I was a CIA agent, like I was just spying and whatnot, and pulling my cell phone out to take pictures when they weren't looking and stuff like that. When I have done it, man, I don't. It's hard for me to lie to people and all that. So like, I'd like to look at one of your apartments, please. It's like, why are you wearing a DeRosa Group shirt?
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. When I've done it, I've gone in there. I'm like, hey man, I'm trying to buy that right down the road, that property that's right down the street from you. I want to buy that. Show me your, what you guys have and whatnot. Cause I've found that this is interesting, and I'm not, knocking you for secret shopping, because a lot of my team members still do it because it's fun, first of all. And maybe you get a little bit more open kimono with the property manager. But here's the thing. I find that other apartment communities in the realm of the one that you're buying, they'd rather have the resident than you. But the way to look at it is that you're all kind of pulling the market up by increasing, standard unit quality. And if you can get an extra $50 by providing that much more value to your residents, maybe they can get that $50 too. That you're actually not direct business partners, but you're perhaps like maybe a way to call it as friendly competitors that you want to help each other out. A lot of our site managers will call other properties and say, hey, how you doing today? Where are you guys at right now? Oh yeah, we're 92% leased. We're leasing at $1,200 a month. We're this, we're that. They might not tell you what the delinquency number is, but they'll tell you what their current market price is and what concessions they're offering and those kinds of things. Because they, to a degree, want to help each other out. Right?
For sure.
Yeah. So I found that. One last thing before we move on. Before I let you go here, actually, you mentioned family office, right? This is a while ago. So your partners with the family office. I just wrote that down because I'm like, ooh, family office. Are you working with family office as an equity provider into your deals now, or is that just a company you're working with for data management?
Great question. So we have started to work with several family offices,
Nice.
On the equity side, where they're placing, funds into our projects. And what you're seeing right now, Matt, is, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty on the retail side. So retail investors that are investing $75,000, $100,000, $150,000, where really, we're at the bottom of the market or dang close because of where interest rates are and what's happened over the last few years. And so it should be a time where, people are really eager to get into, apartment investments. But that was the case, 2-3 years ago when we were at the top of the market. And that's pretty typical in the stock market, in the real estate market, the bond market, you name it. Whereas the family offices, the institutional capital, like they are ready to go. They're excited about where we're at in this current, cycle. And so we have focused a lot of time and effort on, building those relationships out with those groups. And it takes time. It's not something where you meet a family office and they're coming into your deal the next month. It may take 6 months. It may take a year.
They don't bring their checkbook to the first meeting, do they?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. How have you, give us some tips to the best ever listeners that are here, they've achieved some success, maybe had a couple of full cycle exits and everything like that. They may believe that they're ready for the family office conversation. What are some tips you may have for people that want to make that their next transition point?
Yeah, I would say number one, prepare some sort of company profile, that stands out from the rest, that's very professional, that shows your team that you've put together, shows your track record, gives that family office everything they need at their fingertips, but it's not too loaded down with data where it's 100 pages long and they're just like, gosh, this is too much. We're on to the next. Number two, stay in front of them. Just because you had one good meeting, doesn't mean that you built a relationship out with them. So show them the deals that you're looking at, make sure to call them, make sure to update them, via email on what you're doing and build that relationship over time. And then third, I would say just make sure that whoever you're working with, whether it's institutional capital, family office capital, even retail capital, make sure that those individuals align with your core values. If they don't, I would continue to search. There's plenty of capital out there. And so just make sure that they're going to be good partners to work with, because that's really important. It may seem enticing on the front end to get a large check, but if it's, not a good business partner to work with, there's going to be pain down the line. Oh yeah. No, that could be hell on wheels in working with somebody who's just not aligned. I mean, they're not going to either let you drive. You can think of all the reasons, right? Not going to let you drive the bus, and operate. They're not going to have trust in you. They're going to want to micromanage you. They're going to want to force you to sell sooner than you'd like to, all the things, right? So that's great. Listen, Mike, I think I'll go ahead and turn you loose, man. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining me on the Best Ever CRE show. For those best ever listeners that would love to hear more about you and Granite Towers Equity for any of the reasons, to pick your brain, maybe you're in some of the same sandboxes you're in, or even to consider you guys as an investment, how do folks reach out to hear more from you? Yeah, just jump on our website. So it's granitetowersequitygroup.com. We have a contact us page. Fill in your information there. We'll make sure that you get added to our database. We send out a few free goodies as well, free passive investment tracker, our ebook, some other goodies as well. And if you'd like to speak to me, let us know as well. And I'll make sure to jump on a call with you. Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for joining us on the Best Ever CRE show today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for having me on, Matt. I appreciate it. Oh, best ever listeners. That was a great episode with Mike Roeder. I really enjoyed it. I want you guys to go check out his company, Granite Towers Equity Group, to hear more about what they have to offer. And I want you guys to do me a huge favor. In your network, people that are real estate investors that are sitting on a lot of units, but are not happy at the amount of units they have. They want to grow. They want to scale. They want to go to the next level, dare I say. Forward this episode to them. Share the amazingness happening here on the Best Ever CRE show with those in your network. Forward it off to somebody. And also, while you're at that, like this episode and make sure you're already a subscriber to the Best Ever CRE show so you can help us grow while we help you grow. Do a little bit of both here with Best Ever CRE. Until then, guys, come see me next Friday and check out all the other Best Ever CRE hosts with their contributions to the Best Ever CRE movement. If I could call it that, I'd love to be a part of it as well. Join us. Until then, guys, thanks for listening and have a best ever day.